My name is Senator Worrell. I'm a government senator from Barbados. And my involvement with the workshop on sustainability, energy, and development um, basically comes from, in terms of being someone from the Caribbean and recognizing that we really ought to be the ones who are championing sustainability and climate change because it really would impact on us most. So having this workshop, I believe, came at an opportune time because within the Caribbean, we have built our development more or less on fossil fuel, and we recognize the need to change. And many of our countries, including Barbados, are at the stage where we are implementing the necessary changes in terms of moving towards renewable energy. It is perhaps something that we should have done much sooner because of the availability of many of the resources, the sunlight and the wind and so forth. So I think that this workshop helped to bring into focus the needs and also the opportunities and the ways that we can make it more of a reality in terms of the Caribbean territories becoming green economies. Visiting the Savannah East project, for me, it was a learning experience. It was possibly the first lead construction project that I've ever encountered, and I was most fascinated about what was the requirements in terms of getting the lead registration, in terms that you had to put certain things in place even before you started the construction of the building. And I recognize initially that obviously this would be a tremendous cost in terms of construction, but the benefits of it in the long term would redound to the persons who utilize the building and the owner of the building in terms of being able to reduce your energy consumption and also your carbon footprint and so forth. And I think that if this is something that we could replicate throughout the Caribbean in more of our construction in terms of sustainable development, because part of the project you also need to utilize recyclables, you also have to do recycling within the building and so forth, and including the energy efficiency components, take into consideration what reducing your the use of water and in the project. So I think that it was really an eye-opener for me, especially from the construction stage and all of the things that you have to put in place to make sure that you meet that certification, like reducing the dust on the construction site, taking into consideration the environment as well, and not negatively impacting the people who live around or the community around the area in which you are building as well. And these are practices that we should really be utilizing more, and in particular, because within the Caribbean, we are oftentimes the end user of a lot of products, and if we can find a way to recycle and to reuse a lot of that material, especially in our development and in new buildings and construction, it would benefit us tremendously. I think the opportunities and challenges the Caribbean face in terms of energy and sustainable development, they are varied. While dealing first with the challenges would be in terms of the cost for the technology. If we can find a way in terms of bringing down that cost, and we possibly need to do a little bit more research in our end in terms of identifying the technologies which would meet our needs, because within the Caribbean, Barbados, for instance, we may be limited in terms of our access to renewable sources would be perhaps the photovoltaic, which we're utilizing, and wind. But whereas next door in places like St. Vincent or St. Lucia, they may have access to geothermal energy, which would be a greater for base load. So then how could we basically collaborate and share in terms of energy being produced in one jurisdiction, being transported or utilized in another? So it's more so a distribution So, and that is where technology and innovation would come into play. But in terms of the opportunities, we basically have everything that we need in terms of reducing our fossil consumption. We have sunshine, possibly more than 12 hours a day that we can utilize. We have the ocean as well that we need to tap into more and utilize that. And we have the wind and then the geothermal. So we can basically become a green economy and reduce our use of fossil fuels within the Caribbean. And it is just a matter of getting in touch and doing a bit more research and being a bit more innovative in making sure that we utilize the right technology and we find ways of reducing the cost so that these things become more affordable to the average householder, that they too can also play a part and see the benefit from utilizing renewable energy. The mock committee exercise is actually a good tool for, well, the committee hearing exercise is a good tool for parliamentarians to utilize in terms of sharing information about the SDGs. Because we need to get buy-in from our stakeholders and from our constituents as well. And a lot of the information is at a higher level and it needs to be broken down. And through the committee hearings, you have an opportunity for explanation and for education. So I think it would be useful to utilize that within the parliamentary setting, and it is definitely something that we should consider doing more often in Barbados in terms of using committee hearings as a form of inquiry and also as a means of educating persons, and so that you can also bring in key players and technocrats who would have information about the technology and the resources that they can use that opportunity to share that information with a wider cross-section of people. Because not many people would understand what the goals are about and how to utilize the technology. So through these hearings, you can speak to that and you can educate persons on the technology and the goals and how it would impact on them as well. So I enjoyed the mock committee hearing experience. It was possibly the first first hearing for me because it's not something that we practice in Barbados. We basically would have the Public Accounts Committee, but which focuses on more finance-related matters. The role of parliamentarians in terms of promoting the SDGs is very critical role, because I think that parliamentarians, their role would be in terms of translating that information from the policy and the strategic level down to the ground level, so that constituents would have an understanding, because the SDGs really impact on the constituents and it really translates to development and change in their quality of life. And in order for it to work, they need to buy into it as well. Because in terms of the development goals, it would require for some persons to change the way how they approach certain activities. Change in mindset. And I think that parliamentarians are well suited to help to bring about that change in mindset through dialogue with their constituents. You have community workshops and utilization of the media. And when you collaborate with your colleagues across the world and you sign declarations, you need to also share that information with nationals, with your constituents, so that they can understand what it is that you have signed on to, how would it impact on your life, what changes you need to make, how would it benefit you, so that they can have a buy-in for it and therefore embrace it as well, and also want to, along with you, champion the Sustainable Development Goals. Best practices for parliamentarians to ensure the implementation of the SDGs would include, well, you possibly need to have more frequent debates on the SDGs. So you need to find a way of incorporating it into your parliamentary cycle on an annual basis, so that because persons do listen to debate in Parliament, and it's through the debate in Parliament that policies, legislations are developed. So you need to more or less put in place a bipartisan committee, whatever the case might be, to champion the Sustainable Development Goals. You, as a nation, you must identify what the goals are and the avenue that you would take in order to reach them, what it is that you would want to achieve by a certain time. And it must also be represented in every policy, every project, and every program that you develop as an administration. And if you have that committee of parliamentarians who are responsible for championing the Sustainable Development Goals, well, therefore, they would be the ones who would become the watchdogs, more or less, to make sure that you don't stray. And it must be something that is embraced by both sides of the political divide, by the government and the opposition, so that if you have a change in administration, you will still have some continuity. Because at the end of the day, it is important to the nation, it is important to the environment, so there must be some level of consistency with it and continuation. Well, with one sentence about the entire week, I think that the workshop was an eye-opener, and especially for us in the Caribbean region, we must recognize that the Sustainable Development Goals speak more to us, especially as it relates to climate change. We are the ones who would be impacted first because we are small islands. So therefore, and we have relatively open economies. So it is up to us to be the champions for the Sustainable Development Goals.